did last time. Welcome to episode 3 of Inside the Toy Box.
I like that.
Finding the inspiration. Finding inspiration. Where do you find inspiration?
While eating Chipotle.
Well, it's also the Burrito Cast.
The Burrito Cast. I like it.
As always, I'm Ryan. I'm your community manager. Today we are joined by...
Hi, I'm Q1. I'm the developer here.
And we have Christian as well.
Yeah, I'm here.
Delicious burrito. It's kind of making me jealous.
It's a salad.
Well, it's also burrito-y.
It's got there's no flour tortilla.
I should probably disclaim that this is my first podcast ever. So, if I do say something really stupid, I'm just going to blame it on the fact that it's my first time.
So yeah, Kiwan, you actually suggested the theme idea this week, and I thought it was awesome, so we're running with it. Do you want to kind of set it up a little bit for us? Game inspiration, where does it come from?
I like this question because it's something that I think anyone who works in games has thought about, right? Because you always want to be thinking about, what's the next game idea that I want to work on, right? But where do those ideas come from? And really, for me, it's from a lot of different sources. I get inspired by all kinds of different things. So I was just curious to talk about, with other people, what inspires you? Where do you draw inspiration from? Something that recently has been inspiring for us is just the TV show The Walking Dead. It's a very atmospheric kind of scenario that they've created, and I think we've taken a lot of interesting ideas out of there. So that's just one example. When you look at a different medium like TV, to see what they're doing there, and maybe taking some ideas from the setups that they're providing.
Now, kind of going off on a little bit of a tangent, a lot of people say that games are inspired. Games are like movies. Movies are like games. Do you think some of that is because people are inspired by these different mediums that they say, "Hey, well, this worked here. Let's try it out in games." Do you think that's kind of why?
Yeah, I think there's a lot that you can kind of take from a different medium. Games are interactive medium, which is different than movies, which is kind of like a delivered medium. But at the same time, you can still say, well, this was really cool in the movie. I wonder if I can take that and make a cool mechanic out of it. I think that's kind of like where you can draw some inspiration from different mediums. And it doesn't have to be, movies. It could be a book. It could be, a comic series. Any of these things can be, a fertile ground for really pulling ideas and sparking your imagination.
Now, what about other games? When I'm playing a game, I tend to think of game ideas as well. Not that they're any good, but playing other games gets me thinking about, oh, well, this was kind of interesting. Even if I didn't like the overall game, there might be little pieces to a game that I'm thinking, well, maybe if that was taken and put into this and. Do you find that a lot as well?
Absolutely, and not just in other video games, right? I can play a board game or a card game and be inspired by the mechanics there, right? So I've really been into board games and card games recently because I like how simple they are, right? Because you don't have as many pure computer mechanics to work with. So you really have to boil it down to, what can your audience follow and keep up with, which is, I think, a great thing for a game designer, right? Because the more you can kind of simplify it and boil it down, the easier it is for new people to get involved in it. So I think we take inspiration from games, and not just video games, but all the kind of different games that we play as people.
You want to say something, Christian?
Me? No, I'm good.
Are you inspired right now?
I don't know that I am.
I think he might be dying, actually. Don't go toward the light.
I've been coughing up a storm. I get inspired.
Wise words.
There you go.
So you get this inspiration from many sources: books, songs, other games.
It's so true story. There's a really good design test that's sort of kind of like a practice of game design, and it's you're given 2 sentences, and based on those 2 sentences, you have to create a game, like a GDD or a game or whatnot. But you have
game design document for those.
Yeah, you basically have to create a design based off 2 sentences. They are the most important 2 sentences ever. It's so ridiculous, because you start reading into every single word, and like words to some extent are inspirational. My biggest inspiration are restrictions.
Which those 2 sentences would be very, very strict restriction.
Yeah. I don't know, it really all depends. I've gone as far as to only getting game design ideas from just a song I'm listening to. Me personally, I only really tend to want to make games based on what's around my surroundings. So depending on what game, depending on what game we're trying to work on, like for example, if we were to make a social game, one big thing is going to a cafe or going to a bar and just watching people interact. Like tower defense games, if that didn't come from someone standing in a waiting line, almost like the DMV line.
Yeah.
I don't know where else it came from because it's like a perfect tower defense game, like the ropes being your towers. And
why isn't there a DMV tower defense game?
because
I was just inspired.
Yeah.
Look at that.
I mean, the DMV is filled with monsters, so
and restrictions.
Absolutely.
It's really broad, just like where inspiration can come from. But I think the more important thing is how that inspiration is focused or diluted down into like one single core design flow or design loop for that matter. Like what's the core mechanic behind your inspiration?
That's exactly where I wanted to go next.
Look at that.
We're reading minds. We're reading minds now. So yeah, you have the inspiration. How does that funnel, like Christian said, into something that you can do or make? I mean, what's like the first step after you're inspired?
I think for me, it's kind of the process of having a lot of ideas and then running through a whole bunch of them and seeing what fits. If you want to use the analogy, if you just throw stuff against the wall and see what sticks. It's like when I'm working on a shooter maybe and I'm trying to come up with an idea for a new gun, right? I'll have 20 ideas for a new gun, but let's say 10 of them are similar to guns that I already have built, right? So I throw those out. And then maybe 5 of them aren't really a good fit for the environment that I'm working in. So I throw those out, and then of those 5, then I can really start to kind of tweak and pull and say, all right, which one of these would add the most value, the most kind of the best mechanic into my game. So for me, it's about taking a lot of ideas and really kind of doing this distillation process, right, to the point where we really boil it down to a few good ones, and then kind of test on those and see what fits.
But a lot of that's kind of relying on your gut, though. Sometimes, right? I mean, is there any sort of process like, hey, this inspiration is good, or no, this inspiration is bad based on these factors?
To a certain extent, you just build what I would call like your inspiration taste up, right? When you first start drinking wine, it's like, oh, what's that? Like some people like it, some people don't. But then you keep drinking it, and you start to notice different flavors, different tones.
I can really taste the currents in your inspiration there.
Sure.
So you go from like the box to the jug, right, to the bottle.
So, I think one of the big things is, at least for me, I'm at the point where I sort of from any inspiration I get, like I've removed like so much of it already. Like so much of it gets just filtered down, and that's also a bad thing because I'm really kind of removing a lot of things that could potentially be good. But it's sort of how like I've built up my inspiration flavor profile, if you will. Like this is how I like my inspiration come in, and this is what I'm going to be looking for. And I personally look for more like core abstract mechanics that I can really dwindle down into like specific set of actions. Like that's what I really like. And then that sort of comes into, that's why you have multiple people working on a project, and that's why inspiration comes from, not just one person on a project, but really from everyone. So if Kiwan and I were working on a project, my flavor profile combined with his flavor profile for inspiration would really curate that into like just kind of like this melting pot for like what that game eventually would be, and it would probably have really simple core game mechanics combined with some environmental play or something to that extent.
Sure.
I'm sort of making things up based on my experience with you, but yeah, I guess getting back to the inspiration bit, I think everyone's inspiration flavor profile curates after a certain amount of time, and for a while there, it kind of dilutes itself into what you really, really, really want to pursue.
I mean, it's kind of interesting when you talk about the flavor profile, because I find that mine gets influenced by what I've been intaking recently.
Yeah.
So, for example, I've been watching a lot of football recently, right? So that kind of changes, it makes me think more about those type of mechanics, right? Where, football's got a set of rules and, certain, restrictions around it, but at the same time, inside of those rules, there's a lot of deep gameplay, strategy, and drama that comes out of that. It's really compelling and engaging.
Right.
So I think as you take in different things, your inspiration flavor profile actually changes with what you're consuming.
You are what you eat.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We have somehow related inspiration to food.
I can relate anything to food.
Really?
Anything.
We'll leave
we
it
need
there.
to get Josh on the podcast.
we'll leave that there. Jess, our artist, she actually sent out a tweet today. I don't know if she even knew that we were doing this topic today, but she said too much inspiration can sometimes be worse than no inspiration.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I've definitely had that scenario where you've got like 10 great ideas you want to work on. All you do is think about how great these ideas are, and you don't get anything done. It's absolutely terrible.
Well, how do you get over that, though? I mean, is that where your inspiration taste profile?
You need someone to give you a deadline.
Deadlines.
That's your job.
Yeah. I mean,
But then again, that goes back to the restriction. The deadline is a restriction. At which point, the deadline is a strong motivating factor.
yeah, I mean, the point of inspiration is to dilute it down into one thing that you want to accomplish. So, for example, with words and color, when I was coming up with that concept, my one goal for my inspiration was to merge a matching game with a word game. And that's all I wanted to do. And I ran through many different ideas in my head. And at the time, I was playing Train Yard and Bejeweled.
There we go.
And that's where Words and Color came from. It came from a Bejeweled Train Yard.
Interesting. That was actually one of the first prototype games I played when I got here.
Yeah.
You're like, hey, welcome, play this game.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, all right. I think I'm gonna like it here.
I mean, it's something I do that whenever I have a good idea, like I'll have a little web post or kind of blog thing, personal blog, and I'll just go and I'll put the idea down and I'll write a few lines about it, right? And then not necessarily do any work on it, but if it's something that I like, I'll come back to it and look at it in a couple weeks and maybe add a couple lines to it, change a couple things, and then you just have that kind of in my back pocket, right? So the next opportunity that I have to present a new concept, I can go back to that and say, oh yeah, this would be perfect for it. So I think it's, you want to kind of keep a library of your inspiration so that, you can go back to it and pull something out of it when you find a scenario that fits.
Yeah, it really goes back to like one thought I had when I was watching Studio 60 a lot. Just the concept of a writer's room is like so great. Like you basically have a bunch of people for like a sketch comedy show, just pitching millions and millions and millions and millions of things, and then you like handpick like a couple of things, and then that's what your show is. And to a certain extent, we do that, but as game designers or game developers, for that matter, we do that. But like, it's really not that like refined of a process.
Yeah.
A lot of times, meanwhile, we're going through a game, something won't fit for that show, and like we just sort of kind of can it, and it stays there. And I, for example, have brought things up that I've thought about beforehand, or like, oh, I really wish I could do this because like this would be really cool, and I've tried to bring them up. But a lot of times, like a lot of things go just undone, if you will. Like a lot of inspiration gets lost, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I've always been a fan of that, because in those writer rooms, all the scripts that are in use are actually saved.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And then like you can always go back and be like, oh well, let's revisit this. Like, let's make this funny, or let's make this better. But on the same token, talking about cutting out inspiration, I think one of the biggest things is knowing when your inspiration just isn't good. Because you can get excited about your own inspired idea, but in reality, it can really suck.
Like dog beer.
Yeah.
Like what?
Dog beer.
I don't even know what that is.
Somebody passed me a link to a YouTube thing where somebody created beer for dogs.
Huh.
You can buy beer for dogs. I mean, it's not alcoholic, but
what's the point?
Somebody was inspired. They wanted their dog to share a brew with them.
Wouldn't that be soda then?
Well, no, because it's actually made out of malted barley and like beef stock or chicken stock.
No.
Dogs love it. Whatever. I don't know.
It's weird.
But no, I get what you're saying.
I mean, take it back to cooking, right? Everything that you make tastes good to you, right? Because, I mean, like, when I cook something, I'm hungry, I've spent, a couple hours putting work into this. When I eat it, I think it tastes great. When my roommate eats it, he may think it tastes horrible.
I made something the other day with sweet potatoes that just did not work out well.
Yeah, there is kind of a point where you go, well, even with my own bias, this is still awful. But, you do get this kind of bias toward your own ideas, right? Because they're your own, you kind of, you'll give them a little more slack than you probably should. So
yeah, agreed.
So, like, what's the best thing that has ever inspired you? Like a lasting inspiration. I just dropped a question.
The people, just people. Whether it be people I work with or people I watch. And by people I watch, I mean at a cafe when I'm sitting down enjoying a cup of coffee, and I watch other people, not like I people watch. But you get what I'm saying.
Our next game is going to be Stalkers.
I mean,
it's not going to be creepy. It'd be good.
Yeah. The thing is that like the more natural you can get your inspiration based on like human actions and human, just regular human behavior that people are used to, the more you can expand your game upon, rather than the lower you can get your barrier of entry into a game, the more you can do. The less I have to understand about the rules and systems of the world I need to play in, the more rules and systems I can introduce to you that don't actually need to be explained, because the others are already explained to you because they're sort of innate to you. Like, oh, I do this every day. Like going to a shop. Right? Going to a shop is completely reasonable. Like, why wouldn't you go to a shop? Cutting down a tree and getting an item from it makes a lot of sense, because you chop down a tree and you get wood from it.
I also got a ticket from the city the last time I did that.
Really?
No.
So I think, like, to some extent, being able to get inspired from basic human core interactions really allow you to set the tone for a game that has a low barrier to entry and really makes you think about the additive features of the game that make it an even more compelling game.
Very cool.
Yeah, good answer. I guess I'll take it a little more concrete. Just games-wise, System Shock 2. I mean, it's an old game now, but
Isn't that Bioshock?
No, it's completely different. System Shock 2 is better.
Yeah, it has system.
Sorry.
But in any case, that game was, when I played it co-op with a buddy, right? And it was the first time I played a co-op game, and it was the first time I really played anything that had the depth of System Shock 2. So this was kind of like a double, like, mind-blowing thing, right? So I'm playing co-op, and I'm also playing this crazy game that does so much more than anything else, right? Instead of just being a shooter, I've got, all these different mechanics of hacking and, sneaking, whatever, modifying my guns. Completely revolutionary. So, I mean, that's just kind of been my target for me the past 10 years, is to try and come up with the experience that, for me, like 16-year-old me, that was something completely different. Just totally, revolutionary in my perception of games. And I've been trying to, get back to that ever since. I don't know if I'll ever get there, right? It's a little idealized at this point, but, great inspiration for me.
Well, cool. I think that does it. I mean, this was a tough topic to tackle, really. It's, inspiration is kind of another one of those nebulous things that's very common with games, but it's, kind of hard to pinpoint.
Absolutely.
And again, it's, coming to examples and explanations is really kind of the definition of where inspiration comes from. So on that note, I think we'll just wrap it up. Do we have anything coming out this week, next week?
Well, maybe not.
No, those game things Robin was working on. Anything there?
Not this week. Next week.
Next week. I like it.
In the pipeline.
We're on a sneaking mission. We're just gonna pounce pretty soon.
Yes.
Some other exciting things too, but that's again in the works. But hopefully next podcast will be like information.
We have it.
Yeah.
Very
Right
cool.
now we have information, but it's secret information.
Yeah.
So I think that does it. Inside the Toy Box, I'm Ryan.
Q1.
I'm Christian.
Thanks for listening.
So.